Welcome, dear listener. You have found your way once more to the Sleepy Historian, a quiet corner of the internet where stories from the past are told not to stir excitement, but to calm the mind, soften the breath, and gently prepare you for rest. This is Boring History for Sleep, a place where history is shared in a way that is steady, measured, and softly spoken, where the tales of long ago become a kind of bedtime relaxation, almost like a lullaby wrapped in old parchment and fading ink. If you're someone who enjoys falling asleep to boring history, or if calm bedtime storytelling helps you unwind, then you are in the right place. What you will hear tonight is not a thrilling account of heroes or battles, but a slow and unhurried exploration, a kind of soft-spoken history documentary designed to let your thoughts wander and your eyelids grow heavy. If relaxing history to fall asleep to sounds comforting, then allow me to guide you gently into the rhythm of centuries gone by. Our theme this evening is simple, yet vast. It stretches far beyond kings and wars, beyond ruins and relics. Tonight, we will look upward to the stars. For as long as people have lived, they have gazed at the night sky. Farmers waiting for the right season, priests reading the heavens as if they were books, sailors finding their way across dark waters, and storytellers shaping myths from constellations. The stars were both guide and mystery, a map and a mirror. They promised order, yet hinted at secrets beyond understanding. And so, throughout history, human beings built calendars, carved stone markers, and whispered stories about the heavens that shaped entire cultures. Before we begin, I want to invite you to join me in making this a shared ritual. If this kind of storytelling helps you rest, feel free to like this video, but only if it truly brings you peace. You may also subscribe to Sleepy Historian so you can return whenever you need another history sleep story. And in the comments, let me know where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you right now. It is strangely comforting to know who else is out there, listening to the same soft narration, slowly drifting towards sleep under the same stars. So dim the lights, settle into your pillow. Let the voices of the past speak softly as we wander together through ancient skies and forgotten beliefs. Let the myths unfold. Let the rhythms of time pass quietly. And let the secrets of the stars reveal themselves in the gentlest of ways. And with that, our journey begins. Imagine yourself in a world without electricity, without glowing screens or buzzing lamps. The day ends when the sun dips below the horizon, and night stretches on, vast and unbroken. For the people of the past, this was not emptiness, but fullness, a canopy of stars, bright and constant, guiding them in ways both practical and spiritual. Life moved to the rhythm of the heavens, and the night sky was a clock, a calendar, a storybook, and sometimes a silent companion. In ancient villages, farmers leaned on the stars as faithfully as we rely on weather forecasts today. The rising of certain constellations marked the time to sow seeds or to harvest grain. The Pleiades cluster, for example, was often watched with careful attention. In Greece, its first appearance before dawn meant planting time was near. Across oceans in faraway Polynesia, star patterns helped islanders know when the seas would be calm enough for long voyages. In every corner of the world, the slow, dependable movement of the stars structured daily survival. Night on the farm was quiet, but not empty. You might imagine a family sitting by a low fire, smoke curling upward toward the night. The air thick with the scent of earth and drying herbs. Sheep settled into pens, their faint bleats carrying softly through the dark. Somewhere beyond, an owl cried. Above it all, the heavens stretched wide and luminous. Children would point upward, tracing the shapes their elders taught them. A hunter, a lion, a bear, a scorpion. These were not mere pictures. They were instructions, reminders, and traditions. For travelers, too, the stars were lifelines. A merchant on a caravan road, moving between towns at the edge of deserts, knew the North Star was a fixed point, constant and reliable. Sailors at sea, on waters where landmarks vanished, charted their path with the constellations. To them, each glittering point was not distant and abstract, but essential, as necessary as the compass or rudder. Navigation was not a luxury, but survival, and the night sky was a faithful map given freely each evening. But the stars were not only tools. They were companions. Without artificial light, the sky was deeper, clearer, almost overwhelming. Imagine lying back in a field at night, or pausing along a quiet road and seeing thousands upon thousands of stars glimmering without obstruction. For ancient people, that vastness was not empty. It was alive with meaning. Every family, every village had stories to attach to the patterns above them. A farmer in Mesopotamia might whisper about gods carved in light. A traveler in China might recall an emperor's tale encoded in the sky. And a child in Africa might learn from grandparents how the Milky Way was the path of departed souls, stretching overhead like a river of light. The rhythm of these lives was gentle, steady, repetitive. The sun dictated labor, and the stars framed rest. Evenings were for quiet work, mending tools, spinning thread, telling stories by firelight. Yet always, the heavens overhead gave order to the passing days. Time was not measured by clocks, but by cycles. The moons waxing and waning, the steady return of familiar constellations. This was how people knew when to plant, when to travel, when to prepare for the lean months of winter. The night sky was as familiar as the village road, as constant as the hearth fire. And so, daily life beneath the stars was practical, yet also deeply comforting. The constellations were not abstractions. They were woven into food, shelter, and survival itself. They carried stories, yes, but also instructions. The stars were teachers, reminding people when to sow, when to reap, when to rest. In this way, the lives of ordinary men and women were guided by an endless, glittering presence, a silent chorus above them, night after night, for generation after generation. As the firelight flickered and softened, the night sky began to fill with its quiet authority. For ordinary people, the hours after sunset were not simply a pause in the day, but a time of gathering, of retelling, and of gentle wonder. Without the rush of modern distraction, the stars were the evening's entertainment, the lesson, and the prayer. Families and neighbors would come together, speaking in calm tones, listening to the slow unfolding of stories that stretched across centuries. The constellations were never distant ornaments, but living guides woven into both memory and imagination. In many small villages, it was customary for elders to take children outside and point upward, describing how the lights had been arranged long ago by gods, spirits, or ancestors. To the Greeks, the story of Orion was told in quiet repetition, his figure rising higher as the months grew colder. In China, the summer skies brought the tale of the cowherd and the weaver girl, star-crossed lovers separated by the Milky Way. Among the peoples of the Pacific, navigation chants preserved lineages of stars, each verse linking memory to direction. These stories did more than entertain. They gave structure to the cosmos, turning a vast, unknowable night into something personal and familiar. Socially, these evenings were slow and unhurried. Imagine a cluster of homes with their faint lamps extinguished, the only glow now from a fire in the center. The air is cool, the ground scented with damp earth, the voices low. Someone recounts the story of how their ancestors followed the sky to find this place. Someone else sings a song whose verses mirror the cycle of constellations. It is neither spectacle nor performance, but gentle sharing. The stars serve as both stage and script, ensuring continuity from one generation to the next. Ritual, too, depended on the sky. Priests and wise men studied the heavens, not with telescopes or instruments, but with memory and patient observation. The first glimpse of a certain star might mark a festival, the beginning of a season of offerings, or the opening of trade routes. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats were aligned so that priests could track celestial movements from their summits. In Egypt, the rising of Sirius foretold the flooding of the Nile, an event on which survival depended. These alignments are not abstract calculations, but practical, daily anchors. Communities trusted the sky as one trusts the turning of the year, steady and beyond dispute. But for the common people, the experience was quieter, less ceremonious. To lie under the sky was to feel a rhythm greater than the self. Shepherds keeping watch in the stillness of fields knew that stars offered more than beauty. They provided comfort. Sailors sleeping by the shore heard waves moving with a rhythm as constant as the constellations above them. Farmers falling asleep outside their doors knew that the heavens kept watch as faithfully as any guard. This presence was both intimate and infinite, near enough to be woven into lullabies, distant enough to inspire awe. The stars also offered a sense of order when earthly life was uncertain. Crops failed, storms came, rulers changed, wars swept through, yet the constellations returned, season after season, unchanged. To a person living centuries ago, this reliability was not just astronomy. It was reassurance. The world might be unpredictable, but the heavens above remained constant. Generations lived and died under the same configurations, the same slow arcs. That constancy was a kind of quiet promise. Though human lives were fleeting, the stars endured. So, in the stillness of night, daily life and cosmic order intertwined. A child learning the names of constellations was not only learning stories, but the cycles of planting and harvest. A sailor chanting verses to guide a voyage was not only memorizing directions, but preserving identity. A priest marking a star's rising was not only practicing faith, but keeping his people alive. The night sky was an encyclopedia, a calendar, a hymn book, and a companion, all written in light. The rhythm of life beneath those stars was steady and simple. No loud urgency, no rushing hours, only the endless turning of the heavens. And with each turn, lives found their measure, quiet, practical, yet deeply rooted in something far beyond the horizon. When the long day was finished and the tasks of survival set aside, night was not only a time for stories or rituals, but for rest beneath the steady canopy of the stars. Sleep itself was regarded as a gift connected to the heavens. The stars above marked the passing hours, and for many people, to close their eyes beneath them was to feel sheltered by an eternal order. Imagine yourself lying on a simple mat of woven reeds, the scent of smoke still in your hair, hearing the quiet hush of insects and the distant call of an owl. Above you, constellations drift slowly westward. Each one seems to watch over you, steady and unmoving in its role. Dreams, too, were thought to be influenced by the sky. Many early societies believed that the soul wandered upward in sleep, visiting realms mapped across the heavens. The Babylonians recorded dreams as messages guided by planets. The Greeks described the gates of sleep, one of horn and one of ivory, through which true or false visions enter the mind. In Egypt, priests translated dreams into omens, often looking skyward to find their meaning confirmed. Night became not only a pause for the body, but a bridge between the earth and the eternal dome above. For ordinary people, this meant their sleep was never fully separate from the stars. The two were bound in imagination and faith. Some communities even timed their rest with the rising or setting of specific stars. Nomadic groups on open steppes might sleep in shifts, guided by which constellation stood above them. Farmers, accustomed to waking before dawn, knew the exact hour when a certain star reached the horizon. Without clocks, the heavens served as both the measure of time and the quiet overseer of nightly rhythms. A family might say, "We will sleep until Orion's shoulder touches the trees," or "We rise when the morning star glows above the river." Such phrases were both poetic and practical, binding daily life to the cosmic clock. Even fears of the night were softened by the presence of stars. Darkness itself could feel boundless and overwhelming. Yet when the heavens shone clearly, fear was lessened. The scattered fires of the universe offered guidance and comfort, reminding wanderers of direction, reminding the anxious of constancy. Travelers who lost their way in the wilderness found courage by recognizing a constellation. Villagers frightened by distant storms reassured themselves by noting that the stars still held their course. To live with such a sky was to feel protected by a ceiling that never collapsed, no matter how uncertain life on the ground might be. The rhythms of work and rest, story and silence, all pulsed with this celestial order. To grind grain at dawn, to till fields under the midday sun, and to sleep beneath constellations was not separate activity, but a seamless cycle. Each moment of daily life echoed the greater cycle above, rising, setting, returning. For an ancient farmer or shepherd, this sense of repetition was soothing, a reminder that while lives were fragile, the heavens were firm. And yet there was also wonder. Though people grew accustomed to using stars as tools, they never lost sight of their beauty. The Milky Way stretched like a pale river, sparking tales of pathways to other realms. Shooting stars inspired awe, sometimes fear, but always a sense of mystery. Children whispered questions to parents. What are these lights, and why do they never fall? Parents might answer with quiet authority, weaving myths that soothe curiosity while preserving a sense of the unknown. In this way, wonder was carefully balanced with familiarity, allowing the stars to remain both practical and magical. For those who lived centuries ago, sleep under the stars was the most natural conclusion to a day. There were no roofs for many, no walls thick enough to block the sky. The universe was not distant, as it feels now, but immediate and enveloping. The stars were companions as intimate as family, as constant as breath. Each night, as eyes grew heavy and voices faded, the celestial order offered its own lullaby, steady, silent, endlessly returning. The daily life of people under the ancient sky was therefore not only survival, not only work, not only ritual. It was also surrender to a vast rhythm that included sleep, dreams, and the quiet passing of hours beneath constellations. Imagine yourself in that world, lying still, hearing the night creatures, feeling cool air against your skin. You look up, see the stars, and know, as countless before you knew, that you are small but not alone. And with that knowledge, sleep comes gently. Among those who gazed at the heavens, not only with wonder, but also with patient discipline, was a man named Hipparchus. He lived in the 2nd century before the Common Era, During a time when the Greek world was still scattered across islands and coastlines, its culture a blend of philosophy, mathematics, and observation of nature. For most people, the stars were guides or symbols, but for Hipparchus, they were also problems to be solved, questions to be answered, patterns to be understood. His story is less dramatic than that of generals or kings, yet it shaped the way later civilizations imagined the universe. Little is known of his early life. Records do not tell us where he was born with certainty, though some suggest Nicaea in Bithynia, a region near the Sea of Marmara. What we do know is that he grew up in a culture where the sky had already been carefully studied by earlier Greeks, Egyptians, and Babylonians. He would have encountered myths of gods placed among the constellations, but he would also have encountered clay tablets inscribed with detailed planetary movements, handed down from Mesopotamia. In this way, he lived between two worlds, the poetic and the mathematical, the mythic and the measurable. What set Hipparchus apart was not only his curiosity, but his persistence. While others enjoyed the beauty of the stars, he returned to them night after night, measuring their positions with instruments, comparing what he saw with what earlier astronomers had written. Imagine him on a quiet evening, a bronze astrolabe in hand, aligning its parts with the horizon, watching the faint glow of stars flicker into view. His work was slow, repetitive, and required immense patience. Yet from this calm persistence came discoveries that would echo through centuries. One of his most remarkable achievements was the creation of a star catalog. He recorded the positions of hundreds of stars, not only noting their brightness, but carefully placing them against a grid of coordinates. This grid was itself a contribution. He refined the use of latitude and longitude projected onto the heavens, so that stars could be located not merely in relation to one another, but in relation to a broader celestial system. To imagine this is to picture an ancient scholar quietly inscribing lists by lamplight, translating the brilliance of the sky into symbols on papyrus. Hipparchus also noticed something curious. When he compared his own measurements to older Babylonian records, the positions of the stars did not perfectly align. Slowly, with careful thought, he realized the cause. The Earth itself was shifting. The axis on which the planet turns was not fixed, but slowly moved, altering the backdrop of stars across long ages. This phenomenon, known as the precession of the equinoxes, became one of his greatest insights. To modern ears, it sounds abstract, but to Hipparchus, it was the patient uncovering of a cosmic rhythm invisible in a single lifetime. He revealed that the heavens themselves were not eternally fixed, but subtly in motion, as if the universe breathed on a scale too vast for ordinary eyes. Despite his brilliance, Hipparchus did not live as a celebrated figure surrounded by wealth. Accounts suggest he worked in seclusion, perhaps in Rhodes, far from the bustling centers of politics. His legacy was not grand monuments, but quiet pages of calculation and measurement. To imagine his life is to imagine a man whose days were filled with instruments, charts, and the steady practice of comparing numbers. His work was meditative in its way, reflecting a belief that truth revealed itself not in sudden visions, but in long patience. The influence of Hipparchus stretched far beyond his own generation. Centuries later, Ptolemy would build upon his catalog in the famous Almagest, preserving and extending his measurements. Even today, fragments of Hipparchus' work remain relevant, as his careful mapping gives insight into the shifting of stars across millennia. His life reminds us that history is not only shaped by warriors and rulers, but also by those who quietly measure the sky, their tools simple, their patience immense. When you think of Hipparchus, imagine not a dramatic figure commanding armies, but a solitary observer beneath the night sky. His gift was not conquest, but continuity, the ability to carry the ancient tradition of stargazing into new realms of precision. His biography is therefore less a story of events and more a story of persistence. He embodied the steady rhythm of looking upward, night after night, translating the heavens into a human language that could be passed forward. In this way, his life becomes part of the calming pattern we are tracing. Just as ancient villagers rested beneath constellations, and just as shepherds guided their flocks by the stars, Hipparchus gave form to that same sky. He turned nightly wonder into steady knowledge. His biography is not only the tale of one man, but also the tale of how human patience meets the vastness of the cosmos. It reminds us that history, even when quiet, is full of enduring light. The work of Hipparchus did not fade with his passing. Instead, it was preserved, adapted, and folded into the broader story of ancient science. To understand this continuation, one must look to the scholar who would later overshadow him in fame, though not entirely in originality, Claudius Ptolemy. Ptolemy lived some 3 centuries later in Roman Egypt, and he gathered, organized, and expanded upon the efforts of his predecessors. His book, The Almagest, became one of the most influential texts in the history of astronomy, and at its heart rested the observations of Hipparchus. Imagine the long chain of knowledge linking Mesopotamian star records to the careful catalogs of Hipparchus, and finally into the polished treatise of Ptolemy. The story is one not of sudden breakthroughs, but of patient accumulation. Each generation added its stone to the foundation, knowing that their work might never be fully credited, but that it would serve as part of something greater. Ptolemy, writing in Alexandria, had access to libraries, instruments, and the mathematical culture of his age. Yet he leaned heavily upon the data collected centuries earlier on those quiet nights in Rhodes. In the Almagest, Ptolemy credited Hipparchus with discovering precession, acknowledging that the Earth's orientation shifted slowly over time. He also incorporated Hipparchus' star catalog, preserving for future readers a vision of the night sky as it had been observed in the 2nd century before the Common Era. When you imagine Ptolemy writing, picture him not in isolation but surrounded by scrolls, notes, and fragments of earlier work, piecing together a grand synthesis. In his hands, Hipparchus' quiet diligence became part of a structured system that sought to explain the cosmos in full. This system, however, was not what we would call accurate today. Ptolemy's model placed the Earth at the center of the universe, with planets and stars revolving in elaborate circles and epicycles. To modern minds, it may seem clumsy, but at the time it represented an elegant compromise between observation and belief. The heavens appeared to circle the Earth, and mathematics was bent to accommodate that appearance. What matters here is not the correctness of the system, but the fact that Hipparchus' measurements gave it weight. Without his detailed catalog, Ptolemy's constructions would have lacked their firm anchor in data. The biography of Hipparchus thus extends beyond his own life, woven into the work of those who came after. When medieval scholars in the Islamic world translated the Almagest into Arabic, and when later European scholars translated it into Latin, they were indirectly carrying Hipparchus' legacy forward. His figures, his corrections, and his awareness of celestial movement traveled silently through languages and centuries. Even if his own name was not always foreground, the rhythm of his work continued to echo. There is something almost meditative in this thought. Knowledge, once written down, travels in ways its creator cannot predict. A chart made under the flicker of a small oil lamp in Rhodes became part of the intellectual inheritance of Baghdad, Cordoba, and Paris. The starlight Hipparchus traced was the same starlight gazed upon by scholars of the Abbasid Caliphate, and the same stars mapped by medieval monks. His biography, in this sense, is not limited to the span of his own years, but stretches out as long as his records were copied, studied, and used. When reflecting on Hipparchus' legacy, one notices the balance between permanence and impermanence. His own original writings have mostly been lost, their papyrus decayed, their ink faded. Yet the ideas and numbers they contain survived through quotation, adaptation, and reworking by others. It is a reminder that history is often fragile, preserved not by grand monuments, but by chance survival of texts and the devotion of later scribes. Imagine the patient hand of a copyist, carefully tracing Greek letters onto parchment centuries after Hipparchus lived, perhaps with no idea who the man truly was, yet ensuring his insights endured. This gentle persistence of knowledge mirrors the slow motions Hipparchus himself studied in the heavens. Just as the equinoxes drifted across the millennia, so too did his work drift through the ages, subtly altering the course of astronomy. In the end, what mattered was not fame or glory, but the quiet continuation of ideas, carried forward by those willing to read, to copy, and to adapt. His story is a calm reminder that history's greatest influences are not always its loudest voices. Thus, when you think of Hipparchus, do not stop at the man himself, but allow your thoughts to extend outward toward the chain of scholars who depended on his measurements. Ptolemy in Alexandria, Islamic astronomers in Baghdad, Renaissance thinkers in Europe, all of them, knowingly or not, were in conversation with a Greek observer who had watched the stars centuries earlier. This is biography not only of a man, but of an idea passed hand to hand across time. It reveals the steady continuity of human curiosity, our desire to know the heavens, to chart them, to find patterns in their silent lights. And so, his life reminds us that history itself resembles the sky he studied. Some figures shine brightly and vanish quickly, while others, quieter and more constant, remain as background stars, guiding the way across centuries. Hipparchus was such a figure, steady, patient, and enduring, shaping the knowledge of the cosmos in ways even he could not have foreseen. By the time centuries had passed after Hipparchus' life, the memory of the man himself grew dim, yet his work lingered in fragments, echoes, and references scattered across ancient and medieval scholarship. In the Middle Ages, particularly within the Islamic Golden Age, scholars preserved and refined much of Greek astronomy. Baghdad's House of Wisdom, an institution devoted to learning and translation, became a bridge between antiquity and later Europe. There, Greek texts such as Ptolemy's Almagest were translated into Arabic. In the margins of those texts, the presence of Hipparchus remained. His name was cited in passages, his observations embedded within calculations, his precession of the equinoxes noted as an essential truth. Imagine, for a moment, a scholar in 9th century Baghdad, perhaps hunched over a manuscript in the glow of an oil lamp. The sound of the city outside softened into the night air. He would not have known the details of Hipparchus' life, but he would have encountered his measurements. In copying them, refining them, and using them to create new tables of planetary motion, he unknowingly ensured that Hipparchus remained part of the intellectual bloodstream of civilization. Through these translations, the chain of continuity stretched across languages, from Greek into Arabic and later into Latin. When Europe entered what we call the Renaissance, these Arabic texts, often retranslated into Latin, became the basis for a rebirth of learning. Scholars such as Regiomontanus and Copernicus consulted them, and though they were often working with layers of translation and adaptation, The roots went back to Hipparchus' careful watching of the sky. Copernicus, who dared to suggest that the sun, not the earth, might lie at the center of the cosmos, still relied upon the precise data that Hipparchus had once recorded. Thus, even in moments of revolution, the quiet presence of the Rhodian astronomer remained. There is a curious gentleness in this legacy. Hipparchus was not remembered through legends or stories, not through statues or songs. Instead, he lived on through numbers, through catalog stars, through the rhythm of precession slowly ticking across centuries. It was not glory but accuracy that carried his name forward. The Renaissance humanists who rediscovered Greek thought saw in him an exemplar of method, a reminder that careful attention to the world could reveal truths hidden in plain sight. In the 20th century, long after the medieval period and the Renaissance had passed, an extraordinary discovery briefly brought Hipparchus back into the light. A palimpsest, a parchment reused for new writing, was found to contain fragments of his lost star catalog. Beneath later Christian texts, faint traces of Greek letters revealed coordinates and notes attributed to him. It was as though, across 2 millennia, the astronomer's voice had whispered once again. For historians and astronomers alike, this recovery confirmed what had long been suspected, that Hipparchus had created the first comprehensive map of the heavens. Think of that for a moment. A piece of parchment, scraped, overwritten, and forgotten, carried beneath its surface the patient work of a man who had died in 120 BCE. Even in its partial survival, it demonstrated the reach of his efforts. The stars he described still shine above us, though shifted slightly by the passage of time, while his measurements remain inscribed in ink both visible and hidden. The rediscovery was not dramatic, not sudden, but quietly affirming. It confirmed that Hipparchus' biography was not merely a matter of ancient references, but could be traced in physical remnants. From Rhodes to Alexandria, from Baghdad to Cordoba, from Byzantium to Florence, his work moved silently, like starlight crossing the vast dark. Even when unacknowledged, even when forgotten by name, the structure of astronomy bore his imprint. When modern astronomers point telescopes into the sky, they still follow a tradition of cataloging, mapping, and measuring that can be traced back to him. His influence is therefore not only historical, but methodological, a way of seeing the sky as a problem to be solved with patience and precision. And so, Hipparchus' life story is unusual. Unlike conquerors, poets, or rulers, he is not remembered for his personality, his ambitions, or his dramatic deeds. He is remembered, faintly but steadily, for his discipline. His biography is a testament to endurance, not of monuments or battles, but of records and numbers, patiently copied by hands that span centuries. His true memorial lies not in marble, but in the quiet act of looking upward, noting what is seen, and setting it down for those who will come after. The story of Hipparchus, carried across cultures and languages, reminds us of the interconnectedness of civilizations. Knowledge does not belong to one time or place. It drifts, much like the slow precession he discovered, from one society to the next, reshaped and renewed. His life, once so localized on the island of Rhodes, became part of a much broader current, one that shaped medieval astronomy, Renaissance thought, and even modern science. In tracing this path, we see the quiet power of ideas to transcend the brevity of a human life and to remain, like the stars themselves, in their places, waiting to be noticed again. When we look up at the night sky, there's a quiet familiarity in what we see. Constellations stretch across the darkness, patterns etched in light. And although we know today that they are burning suns unimaginably far away, the human response to their beauty is much older than our science. Before Hipparchus, before Ptolemy, even before the scribes of Mesopotamia or the priests of Egypt, people gazed upward and tried to make sense of the shining canopy. In the silence of a night without electricity, the stars were not a backdrop. They were the great stage itself, luminous and eternal. Imagine yourself seated near a hearth in an ancient village, thousands of years before formal astronomy. The fire crackles softly, and overhead, the Milky Way stretches like a pale river across the dark. To those early communities, the stars were not abstract points of light, but stories, ancestors, gods, and warnings. Their appearance and disappearance marked the turning of the seasons. Their alignment guided planting and harvest. The sky was a clock, a calendar, and a text written in light. In Mesopotamia, among the Babylonians, the stars became instruments of divination. Priests, called Baru, studied their movements with great seriousness. Clay tablets survive with lists of omens. If a planet appeared in a certain position, it foretold victory or famine or the death of a king. This was not idle superstition, but an ordered system, carefully maintained over centuries. Archaeologists, when unearthing these tablets, have found not random musings but structured records, an archive of sky watching that tied celestial movements to human fate. It was here, in this tradition, that the foundations of what later became astronomy were first laid. The Egyptians, too, bound the heavens to earthly rhythms. Their entire agricultural cycle depended upon the Nile, and the rising of the star Sirius in the dawn sky each year coincided with the flood that nourished their fields. To them, this was not coincidence, but a sacred harmony. Temples were aligned with celestial events, stone corridors guiding the eye towards solstice, sunrises, or the heliacal rising of important stars. Even today, the ruins of Karnak in Luxor hold this memory. Walking among the silent columns, one can still see the deliberate geometry of light and stone, a cosmic order inscribed into architecture. In Greece, the constellations were woven into myth. The hunter Orion, striding across the heavens, his belt shining clearly. The story of Perseus rescuing Andromeda, fixed forever in the stars. The seven sisters of the Pleiades pursued endlessly across the night sky. These stories served many purposes: entertainment, moral instruction, cultural identity. But they also gave the heavens a human face, transforming distant, cold stars into familiar companions. To look upward was to be reminded that the cosmos was not empty. It was alive with narrative. Archaeology adds further layers to this mystery. Megalithic monuments across Europe, such as Stonehenge, appear to align with solstices and lunar cycles. Though much remains uncertain, the persistence of such alignments suggests a continuity of attention. Across continents and cultures, from the desert stones of Nabta in Egypt to the intricate calendar systems of the Maya in Central America, the same pattern emerges. Human beings turn to the stars for meaning. Each site, each artifact, whispers the same truth, that the sky was the universal text, studied long before writing was invented. The mystery deepens when we consider how similar myths and constellations appear across different societies. The Pleiades, for example, are noted not only in Greek tradition, but also in Native American stories, Japanese folklore, and Aboriginal Australian songlines. That small cluster of stars has drawn human imagination into similar shapes and themes across vast distances. It suggests that certain features of a night sky, so prominent and striking, called forth a shared human response. To lie beneath the stars in any place on Earth was to participate in a global act of wonder. Even today, we can sense echoes of this older, mysterious connection. To step outside on a clear night, away from the glow of cities, is to feel a stillness that our ancestors knew well. The stars hang above not as ornaments, but as presences, patient and unchanging from a human perspective. They outlast dynasties, civilizations, even languages. Archaeologists uncover bones, tools, and broken vessels. But the stars themselves are also artifacts of the past, shining now as they did for Babylonian priests, Egyptian farmers, and Greek storytellers. And so, the mystery of the heavens is not only scientific, but cultural. Each ancient society read in them what it most valued: order, fertility, warning, or story. Hipparchus, in cataloging them, stood at the edge of this long tradition. He measured with precision what others had wrapped in myth. Yet the continuity is unmistakable. His stars were their stars, his precession their shifting backdrop. Science and myth are not as far apart as they may seem. Both begin with a gaze upward into the night, and both attempt to bring the incomprehensible within reach. In this way, the archaeology of the stars is not only about stones and tablets, but about the human act of looking. The mystery is less in the sky itself than in the persistent impulse across millennia to make meaning of it. We might say that the stars are mirrors, reflecting back the concerns, hopes, and fears of those who look upon them. That is why they continue to fascinate us. Not because they have changed, but because we continue to return to them, searching for something of ourselves in their light. Archaeology often feels like a conversation across time. A broken tool, a carved stone, a faded inscription. Each is a whisper from those who lived long before us. When it comes to the ancient fascination with the stars, archaeology has uncovered remarkable clues. These discoveries are not always complete, and they rarely answer every question. Yet together they form a mosaic of human effort to bring the heavens down to earth. Consider the Babylonian clay tablets once more. In quiet storerooms of museums, their shelves lined with these fired pieces of earth, their surfaces covered in neat cuneiform lines. They speak of eclipses observed, planets charted, constellations listed. Some of these texts go back nearly 3,000 years. To hold one would be to cradle not only an artifact, but also a record of the night sky as it was seen in that particular time. Archaeologists and historians, when translating them, find careful notes. On this night, Jupiter appeared in the east. Such details remind us that ancient watchers were both storytellers and precise record keepers. From Mesopotamia, let us travel westward in thought to Greece. Here, fragments of bronze and corroded gears tell a story even more astonishing. Discovered in a shipwreck off the coast of Antikythera, the so-called Antikythera mechanism has puzzled and fascinated since it was first brought to light in 1901. At first it looked like little more than an encrusted lump, but careful study revealed interlocking gears of extraordinary complexity. It is now understood as a kind of ancient computer designed to predict celestial positions, eclipses, and cycles. This device, dated to around the 2nd century BCE, shows just how advanced ancient Greek star watching had become. The quiet tick of gears, now silent, once mirrored the rhythms of the cosmos. Further north, in the misty lands of Europe, other mysteries lie in stone. Stonehenge, with its massive standing pillars, has long captured imagination. Archaeological study suggests that its alignments are not accidental. The central axis points to solstices, marking the longest and shortest days of the year. Imagine the slow rising of the midsummer sun, framed perfectly between ancient stones, the first light of dawn touching the circle that had stood already for centuries. To those who gathered there, this was not only an architectural feat, but a way of fixing human life to the great cycles of nature and the heavens above. In Egypt, too, stone holds celestial secrets. The ceilings of tombs and temples bear star charts, painted constellations and deities connected to the movements above. The Dendera zodiac, carved in relief, offers a cosmic map frozen in stone. Standing beneath it, one senses the same urge to preserve the shifting sky in a permanent form. The pyramids themselves, colossal as they are, also appear to align with celestial points, their passages angled towards significant stars. For ancient Egyptians, the heavens were not abstract. They were the dwelling of gods, the path of the soul, and the framework of eternity. Far across the ocean, in the Americas, other sites echo this universal preoccupation. The Maya, with their intricate calendar systems, built observatories such as the one at Chichen Itza. Its round tower, known as El Caracol, contains windows aligned with important astronomical events. Through these openings, priests and astronomers tracked Venus and the Sun, binding rituals and predictions to celestial cycles. Archaeologists exploring these sites find evidence not of casual sky watching, but of a deep and organized science. What is striking across all these discoveries is the consistency of attention. Whether through clay tablets, bronze gears, massive stones, or carved zodiacs, human societies turned immense effort toward capturing the movements of the heavens. The material remains may differ, yet the impulse is the same. The stars were not simply admired. They were measured, calculated, and preserved in material form. The quiet power of archaeology is that it reminds us of continuity. The stars themselves have not changed, but the ways people have sought to understand them leave visible traces. When a fragment of bronze gear is lifted from the sea, when a solstice alignment is noted between ancient stones, we see the persistence of curiosity. It is the same curiosity that guides modern astronomers as they map galaxies or search for distant planets. The tools differ, but the yearning is the same. For those of us listening now, perhaps lying back and letting the soft story carry us towards sleep, there's a comfort in this continuity. The clay tablets, the bronze gears, the massive stones, all are evidence of the same gesture. A gaze upward, a desire to bring order to the infinite. Archaeology does not only uncover objects, it uncovers a shared human habit of wonder. The mystery of the stars is not only in their light, but in the ways people across time sought to fix that light into memory. When archaeologists uncover artifacts of the heavens, they reveal more than measurements and alignments. They reveal the symbolic language through which societies made sense of the cosmos. For ancient people, the stars were never simply points of light. They were woven into stories, painted into myth, and assigned to the rhythms of birth, death, and renewal. These interpretations varied widely, yet a thread of similarity runs across continents and centuries. It is in this thread that the cultural mystery of the stars becomes clear. Take the Mesopotamian sky once again. The constellations recorded on their tablets were not abstract figures. They were divine characters. To them, Orion was not merely a hunter, but a great heavenly figure tied to power and order. Venus, appearing as the bright morning and evening star, was closely linked with Inanna or Ishtar, goddesses of love and war. The stars carried the presence of gods, and their movements signaled divine intention. To read the heavens was not only a matter of science, but of theology, each celestial event interpreted as a message from above. In Greece, myths bound the constellations into tales still known today. Andromeda, chained to the rock; Perseus, the slayer of Medusa; Cassiopeia, seated in her vanity. Each story stretched into the night sky. The Greeks saw the heavens as a stage upon which myths were eternally enacted. The constellations preserved stories, ensuring that human drama was reflected above as well as below. To look upward was to remember not only gods and heroes, but also the lessons embedded in their tales. Egypt, with its grand temples and pyramids, also projected its cosmology into the heavens. The goddess Nut was imagined as the sky itself, arching over the world, swallowing the sun each evening and giving birth to it again at dawn. The stars were her body, glittering jewels on a divine canvas. For Egyptians, alignment with the stars was not an abstract fascination. It was part of the path to eternity. The pharaoh's journey after death was mapped onto the sky, the stars serving as guides through the afterlife. Even now, lying beneath the desert sky, one can sense the stillness with which ancient priests must have regarded the eternal ceiling above. Among the Maya, the stars were woven into cycles of prophecy. The movements of Venus, in particular, held immense significance. Its rising and setting were believed to herald times of change, times of war, or times of renewal. Their calendars, carved in stone and inscribed in codices, were not only mathematical feats, but also instruments of divination. Each celestial pattern signaled a rhythm of history. For the Maya, the stars did not merely mark time. They shaped destiny. In northern traditions, such as those of Norse mythology, the stars glimmered as sparks from the forge of the gods. The Milky Way was seen as a path across the heavens, sometimes described as a road for souls or a bridge to the divine. These cold, clear skies inspired myths of creation and destruction, tying the vast cosmos to human fate. One can imagine a Norse family gathered in a longhouse, the flicker of firelight mingling with the glow of the heavens beyond, weaving tales that bound the distant stars to the immediate warmth of home. What unites these diverse traditions is the sense that the heavens were never silent. People found in them patterns, voices, and signs. The constellations offered not only navigation, but also narrative. To this day, we inherit much of this symbolic language. When modern astronomers name a galaxy after Andromeda, or when we speak of the Belt of Orion, we are continuing a practice that reaches back thousands of years. The lingering mystery lies not in whether the stars themselves hold meaning, but in why humans across every era have insisted upon it. Why do we project stories, myths, and destinies onto the night sky? Perhaps it is a reflection of our search for order in the vastness. Perhaps it is a way of comforting ourselves, of binding the infinite to the familiar. Or perhaps it is something deeper, a recognition that in the silent, unchanging stars, we see a mirror of eternity. Archaeology gives us fragments of this symbolic world. Carved stones, painted ceilings, fragile manuscripts. Yet much remains beyond our grasp. We cannot know exactly how it felt for a priest to stand in an Egyptian temple at midnight, aligning ritual with the stars. We cannot fully recreate the awe of a Maya observer charting Venus. We can only glimpse it through the remains, imagining ourselves beneath those skies. As you let these stories drift through your thoughts, perhaps lying now in a quiet room, with the present day, stars hidden behind city lights or passing clouds, you might reflect on the unbroken chain of gazes that have turned upward. Every culture, every age, has looked to the same heavens. The meanings differ, yet the gesture is constant. That constancy is its own kind of mystery. And so, the stars remain both familiar and elusive. They are the same stars recorded in clay, carved into stone, charted in gears, and woven into myths. They shine above us still, indifferent yet inspiring, silent yet endlessly interpreted. To think of them is to step into the longest story humans have ever told, a story still unfolding each clear night. When we consider the night sky of the ancient world, it is easy to imagine only the learned priest, the astrologer, or the court astronomer gazing upward with intent. Yet the truth is broader, more human. Every person, from the most humble farmer to the ruling monarch, lived under the same dome of stars. The contrast lay not in the view itself, but in the meanings they were taught to see. For the farmer, the stars were part of the natural rhythm of survival. To know when to plant, when to harvest, and when to expect the rains was a matter of life and death. Without the modern clock or calendar, it was the sky that gave the signals. The rising of certain constellations, the return of seasonal stars, guided agricultural work. Imagine a family in a small village, working the fields by day, then at night looking upward to the same patterns their ancestors had used for centuries. For them, the stars were not lofty mysteries, but practical guides, as steady and trustworthy as the seasons themselves. The sailor, too, depended on the heavens. Long before compasses and maps, navigation rested on the constancy of the night sky. The North Star, Polaris, stood as a faithful beacon, marking the way home. Constellations stretched like road signs across the darkness, each with lessons passed down through generations. To travel by sea was to live with danger, yet the stars offered direction. One can imagine the quiet of a ship at night, waves rocking gently, while a navigator traced invisible lines among the stars, steering both vessel and crew by lights so distant, yet so essential. For the elite, the stars carried another weight entirely. They were symbols of power and legitimacy. In Mesopotamia, rulers consulted astrologers before making decisions of war and governance. An eclipse might be read as a warning, a comet as a sign of upheaval. Kings often presented themselves as aligned with the heavens, chosen under favorable stars. The night sky thus became a stage for authority, its silent patterns woven into the justification of earthly rule. The priestly class held a privileged role as interpreters of this celestial text. Where a farmer saw the rising of a constellation as a signal for sowing, the priest saw it as divine communication. They stood at the boundary between human and cosmic, translating the heavens into ritual, omen, and prophecy. For ordinary people, this interpretation was often inaccessible. The mysteries of the sky belonged, in part, to those who claimed to speak its language. Yet despite the differences, there was overlap. A farmer might see in the stars a dependable calendar, while also hearing the priest's story of God's moving in the heavens. A sailor might use the constellations to guide his course, while also believing in the myths those constellations preserved. The stars did not belong exclusively to the elite or the common folk. They were shared, but differently understood. Consider also the domestic setting. A child in ancient Greece, lying on a rooftop in summer, might be told the story of Perseus or Orion by an elder, their eyes wandering from myth to constellation. That same constellation might later serve a navigator at sea or an astronomer in the royal court. Each role drew something different from the same sky, layering meaning upon meaning. In Egypt, while the pharaoh's journey to eternity was written in the stars, the farmer by the Nile watched the same sky for the annual flooding. Both lives, so different in scale, were nonetheless synchronized by the heavens. The contrast between elite and commoner was striking, yet the bond of sky above them was inescapable. The poor man and the king, each in his own way, depended on the lights above. This duality is what makes the history of stargazing so compelling. The stars were democratic in their presence, visible to all, untouched by class or wealth. Yet their interpretations were hierarchical, controlled and shaped by those in power. The heavens belonged to everyone, but the stories told about them often reinforced the divisions of society. Still, when night fell, when silence descended over both palace and village, the same constellations wheeled overhead. Whether read as divine messages, practical signals, or timeless myths, they were constant companions in a world where much else was uncertain. In that sense, the stars united as much as they divided. If you close your eyes and imagine yourself beneath that ancient sky, you might sense both the distance and the intimacy. The distance of countless stars beyond reach, and the intimacy of knowing that ordinary hands once traced their patterns just as carefully as kings did. The night sky was the great equalizer, a quiet stage upon which all of humanity played its part. In the quiet of ancient civilizations, the stars did not shine only as natural lights. They served as instruments of identity, markers of belonging, and even tools of governance. To look at the stars was not just to wonder. It was to participate in a cultural conversation that stretched across generations and across class boundaries. In Mesopotamia, one of the earliest cradles of astronomical thought, the elite preserved their authority in part by their exclusive access to celestial knowledge. The priestly astronomers of Babylon recorded the movements of planets and stars with meticulous care, often upon clay tablets. These records were not shared freely. They were guarded, stored, and consulted when rulers needed guidance. A farmer could tell when the barley should be sown, but it was the court's astrologer who claimed to know whether the coming year would bring prosperity or misfortune, all by reading the sky. This subtle difference between practical observation and priestly interpretation reinforced the divide between commoner and ruler. In Egypt, the contrast was equally striking. The common farmer by the Nile trusted the appearance of Sirius, the star that heralded the flooding of the river. It meant renewal, fertile soil, and another chance at survival. Yet in the palaces of Thebes or Memphis, that same star was woven into royal theology, linked to the goddess Isis, and used to reinforce the pharaoh's divine right to rule. Thus, the identical star meant survival for one and sacred kingship for another. Both gazed upon Sirius, but its meaning diverged sharply depending on one's station in life. Among the Greeks, the separation between practical and philosophical was more porous, yet still present. Ordinary sailors read the constellations to find their way, while philosophers and mathematicians debated the very structure of the cosmos. Aristotle wrote of celestial spheres, while farmers in the countryside looked simply for the rising of the Pleiades to tell them the season had turned. The sky provided both an intellectual canvas for the few and a practical guide for the many. Each class, in its own way, found meaning in the same expanse. In Rome, this contrast deepened further. The elite imported Greek astronomical theories, built observatories, and consulted astrologers before political decisions. Emperors often had horoscopes cast at their birth, and entire careers could rise or fall depending on the predictions of celestial interpreters. Meanwhile, the common Roman might look up at the same night sky and see reminders of myths, shared in stories told beside a hearth or whispered in the streets during festivals. The gap lay not in access to the stars themselves. Those belonged to all, but in the interpretations layered upon them by those who held power. Ritual life highlighted this division even more clearly. In many ancient societies, ceremonies were timed to align with celestial events. The elite organized festivals that coincided with solstices, equinoxes, or planetary conjunctions. For the ordinary participant, these gatherings were communal occasions of feasting and celebration. For the rulers, however, they were opportunities to showcase divine approval, to remind all present that their reign was in harmony with the cosmic order. The very same stars that guided a farmer's planting were thus also deployed to maintain the structure of power. Yet, despite these differences, there remained moments of shared wonder. Imagine a clear night during a festival in Athens, when both citizen and statesman looked upward at the same sky, their eyes following the same arc of a constellation. Or picture Rome, where a soldier on guard duty beneath the stars may have drawn comfort from their familiarity, just as an emperor might have sought reassurance from an astrologer's interpretation. Though their purposes diverged, their gaze was shared. It is important to remember also the role of women, often overlooked in the official histories of astronomy. While elite men consulted star charts and debated theories, women, in both households and temples, preserved oral traditions tied to constellations. Mothers told children the stories of heroes and gods among the stars, embedding cultural memory in the rhythms of family life. Priestesses in certain cultures also participated in ritual observances tied to lunar cycles, linking the stars to fertility, timekeeping, and religious life. Thus, even in a world where power tilted toward male elites, the stars quietly wove themselves into the lives of women as well. This contrast between social groups demonstrates something both simple and profound. The stars were universal in presence, yet profoundly unequal in meaning. They belonged to everyone, yet the power to interpret them was often claimed by the few. And still, in the quiet moments beneath the hush of night, it was possible for anyone, peasant, priest, or king, to pause, look upward, and feel that same gentle awe. When we trace these differences today, we begin to see that the night sky was not only a calendar or compass, but also a mirror of society itself. Its shared patterns reflected the inequalities of the human world, even as they transcended them. For those who ruled, the stars offered legitimacy. For those who labored, they offered survival. And for all, they offered beauty, constancy, and the comfort of something greater than themselves. The stars, constant yet ever-shifting, served as both a practical guide and a cultural symbol. By comparing how elites and common people engaged with the heavens, we gain a window into the contrast that shaped daily life across civilizations. But beyond contrast, there is also continuity, a shared thread of human curiosity and reverence. In Mesopotamia, for example, common people used simple observation. They saw how certain stars appeared at different times of year and adjusted their agricultural routines accordingly. A herdsman on the plains might have noticed the gradual rising of Orion, associating its brilliance with the coming cold of winter. For him, the stars were seasonal markers, reliable as the passing months. Meanwhile, in the royal courts, the stars were not merely markers but portents. When an eclipse darkened the sky, it could be read as an omen against the king himself. Elaborate rituals were conducted, sometimes even placing a temporary substitute king upon the throne to absorb the ill fortune, before the rightful monarch resumed his role. Thus, the same astronomical event meant reassurance for the shepherd and peril for the sovereign. The Egyptians, too, experienced this layering of meaning. The annual flood of the Nile was a reality for all, but the interpretation of the heavens diverged by class. Farmers waited for Sirius to appear at dawn, signaling that water, and with it, fertility, would soon return. For the priests and Pharaoh, however, Sirius was entwined with cosmic myth, a celestial being reinforcing divine order. Imagine a humble villager standing at the riverbank, greeting the star with hope, while in a nearby temple, the priests greeted it with incense and chant, weaving it into a ritual that reaffirmed the sacred bond between heaven and earth. Among the Greeks, the constellations held stories that united high and low alike, yet their uses varied. A fisherman might know only that a certain constellation guided him safely home, while philosophers like Plato or Ptolemy debated whether the stars were divine entities or distant fires. At festivals, myths were retold under the stars, where a child might learn of Perseus or Andromeda by looking upward. The child's innocent wonder and the scholar's abstract reasoning were separated by education and privilege, but both were rooted in the same canopy of night. The Romans emphasized the political utility of the stars. Emperors often linked their reigns to celestial phenomena, proclaiming comets as signs of divine approval. Julius Caesar's death, for instance, was followed by the appearance of a great comet, which was heralded as proof of his deification. For the common Roman, however, stars appeared more in myth, in astrology practiced at the household level, and in popular superstition. A family might consult an astrologer before arranging a marriage or embarking on a journey. The grandeur of imperial propaganda and the intimate hopes of a single household both leaned upon the same heavens, though with vastly different aims. It is also worth noting how festivals acted as bridges between these groups. In Greece, during the Panathenaic festival, both elite and commoner gathered under the stars. While the rituals were designed to display civic unity and the city's greatness, there were also moments of shared experience. Music, torchlight, and the steady presence of constellations above. In Rome, Saturnalia blurred lines between social classes. Beneath the night sky, roles could be reversed, masters serving slaves, if only for a short time. The stars presided silently over these temporary dissolutions of hierarchy, reminding participants that social distinctions were human inventions, not cosmic truths. The role of women deserves continued attention here. In domestic life, women preserved and transmitted star lore, embedding it in lullabies, seasonal practices, and stories told at the hearth. The constellations became part of familial memory, not just scholarly debate. In temple life, women participated in lunar rituals, acknowledging the moon's rhythms as intimately tied to fertility, agriculture, and timekeeping. The elite male astronomer may have drawn diagrams of planetary orbits, but the woman marking her calendar by the moon was equally engaged in the living rhythm of the heavens. Over time, as knowledge was codified and passed down, these divisions became more pronounced. The rise of written astronomy created barriers, limiting deep study to those who could read, often priests, scholars, or noblemen. Yet oral tradition ensured that common people were never excluded from the sky's meaning. They might not interpret planetary retrograde motions, but they told stories of heroes placed among the constellations. These stories traveled further than clay tablets or scrolls, carried on by memory and voice. What emerges, then, is a dual reality. The stars were democratic in their visibility, yet hierarchical in their interpretation. For elites, they were tools of power and legitimacy. For commoners, they were companions of labor, markers of time, and sources of myth. Both views were valid, both deeply human, and both echo across the centuries. Today, when we look up, the stars are stripped of political control, free of priestly exclusivity. Yet the same contrasts linger. To a scientist, the stars are data points, distances measured in light years. To someone lying awake at night, they may simply be a comforting pattern, a reminder of continuity. In this way, we inherit both strands of ancient life, the practical, the personal, the political, and the poetic. And so, as the ancients once did, we close this reflection by imagining the night sky as a shared canvas. For kings, it was an emblem of power. For laborers, it was a guide. For mothers and children, it was a storybook. And for us, centuries later, it remains an invitation to quiet wonder, a reminder that we, too, are participants in the timeless dialogue between earth and sky. And so, dear listener, we come to the quiet end of our journey through the stars. From the daily routines of farmers and shepherds, to the lofty calculations of priests and rulers, to the myths and memories carried by families and storytellers, the sky has always been both a mirror and a guide. Its patterns reminded the ancients of time's rhythm, of order and mystery, of life's fragility and its continuity. For us today, the stars may seem distant, reduced to numbers and diagrams, or to faint glimmers above the haze of modern cities. Yet they remain what they have always been, a canvas for thought, a reminder of vastness, a silent witness to every generation before us. Just as a Roman family might have looked up and wondered what a comet meant, or a Greek child might have traced Perseus among the constellations, you too gaze upon the same timeless vault, perhaps with your own quiet questions. The differences between ancient elites and common people, between priests and laborers, between scholars and dreamers, blur when seen under the same sky. All were participants in a shared human story, just as we are now. The stars connect us not only to the past, but also to each other. Across oceans, across centuries, across languages, countless eyes have turned upward, seeking reassurance, guidance, or simply a moment of stillness. If this kind of calm storytelling has helped you drift toward rest tonight, I invite you, gently, without urgency, to support this journey. You may choose to like the video or to subscribe, but only if you feel it truly brings you peace. And in the comments, let us know where you are listening from and perhaps what time it is as you close your eyes. There is a quiet comfort in knowing that others, in different corners of the world, are lying under the same stars, falling asleep to the same old stories. As you let go of the day, imagine yourself reclining beneath the constellations. Feel the steady rhythm of breath, like the rhythm of the cosmos itself. The ancients may have read omens in the sky, or calculated calendars, or whispered myths, but for you, in this moment, the stars need no interpretation. They're simply there, silent, steady, unhurried, inviting you to rest. So close your eyes now. Let the stars above fade softly into dreams. The stories have been told, the rhythms explored, the mysteries shared. All that remains is quiet. May the night be kind. May your sleep be deep. And may tomorrow find you refreshed, carrying just a trace of the calm that history has offered here. This has been the Sleepy Historian, sharing another chapter of boring history for sleep. Until next time, rest well, dream gently, and remember, you are never alone beneath the stars.